My name is Tod Gunther. I'm a city councilor here in Orting. By day I was homeless, and by night I'd come here to attend city council meetings on TV. It was a beautiful morning, kind of like today. Woke up at 7 a.m. Life was good, very happy, and then a family tragedy happened. Something that could affect any one of us in life. And by 7 p.m. I was homeless on the streets of Tacoma, under a bridge, and life started happening really hard. In addition to being homeless, in the end I actually lost everything I owned. All my belongings, my family pictures, things my mother and my father gave me, going all the way back to my childhood. It's all now gone. And I just have now a small little, basically, closet of belongings. And, even just talking about it, it can make you emotional. It's something that people just generally rarely ever go through, to lose their entire lives. Life on the streets, I'd have to say, was probably one of the darkest times of my life. Lots of hardship, lots of fear and worry, because you've never been there before. You don't know what it's like, and your life suddenly just, in a moment's notice, turns upside down. I think it was Mike Tyson that said, life is going well until you get hit in the face. And that's kind of what, sudden homelessness feels like. So it was a very dark time, probably the darkest in my life. And by day, I would sleep with rats and panhandle alongside freeways to make money, to be able to afford to come back to Orting. And then by night, I'd be here in the city, on television, basically, signing off on $1 million checks. Probably one of the most dangerous parts of being on the streets is, like everyone sees in the news quite often, there are bum beatings, there are assaults, the homeless get urinated on, and so that some of that stuff actually happened to me. I'd have rocks thrown at me, soda cans, get a job loser. And of course, no one knew at the time that I actually had a job running a very prosperous city here in Orting. So, but one of the worst things that happened to me during that time was about 3 a.m. I got surrounded by a gang that tried to get to me. And it was actually, it was terrifying. And so I managed to get away, but I hate to think what would happen if I didn't. So I got, firsthand what it feels like for many of the homeless. And then of course you have the sub-zero temperatures. It's hard enough, wake up behind a dumpster during the morning. And it's another thing to be out there when it's 10 degrees out and snow and you don't have much to help you. So as far as being a city councilor at the same time that this was all going on, what would be happening is that I would be coming, into city council chambers as a homeless person. So that was a worry, and then also stigma. How would the citizens feel about knowing that their city councilor was homeless, and all that might have implied, well, he must have been into drugs, he must have made a bad decision, he must be an addict, something like that. But the most ironic thing was when I was sitting in council up at the days, I'd have citizens come, and be angry, about the homeless in town. They're losers, get rid of them, and things like that. And little did they know that their own city councilor was actually governing our city, despite the stereotypes that a lot of people have and the myths. So how I actually finally got off the streets was a number of people, kind of like angels, came beside me in certain ways. One did one thing, one did another. One would offer food, the other one would offer some money. And little by little, that helped me survive, in addition to the soup kitchens and panhandling that I had to do to make it all work out. And then finally, here in Orting in the school district, hired me for a paraeducation job, which is a teacher's assistant, and to help with children with special needs. And that finally got me the job to finally get a small place, a room, and pull myself back out. So being on the streets for a while, you get to walk in their shoes, and you get to see some of the realities from the myths. I mean, the myths of the homeless are probably as many as nails that are on the wall. They don't have jobs, they're into drugs, and you know, it runs the total gamut. But when you're on the streets, you get to know basically everyone there on a first name basis. You get to see behind the curtains, so to speak, and get to know them in the real way instead of the way the media portrays. And what you find out is the homeless are not just a set of problems, but a set of gifts. And so some of those gifts are really tremendous. For example, strength. You know, it's not even a word that describes the homeless. When you take into fact they're living at sub-zero temperatures. They've lost all contacts with people. They don't have a job, and their resiliency and their grace under so many problems. You know, I'd like to, you know, you watch these survivor shows like Alone, is a popular one, and you eventually see that the things that the homeless are going through are often far harder than any of those kinds of shows. You know, when I think of all the things that they have to endure, I think in a lot of ways it's even harder than those who climb Mount Everest. It certainly takes a lot from them. So one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, because you know, the media does such a often bad portrayal of them, is that, you know, as I said earlier, the homeless are not just a problem to be solved, but a set of gifts. I don't think most people know that the unofficial song, for example, of America, God Bless America, was actually written by a former homeless man named Irving Berlin. Or the recent #1 NFL draft pick, Josh Jacobs, was a former homeless man. There are so many examples. Charles Goodyear, who invented vulcanized tires, former homeless man. The homeless people have actually helped change the world, and a lot of people don't realize that. Just last year, for example, or actually 2 years ago, there was a man in Sumner who found $16,000 in a paper bag. And what he did is he took that, despite his own difficulties, took that in and turned it in, rather than pocketing it. I don't know many homeless people would do that, let alone homeless. And these are some of the stories that don't often get told, but they're very important. As far as politicians go, you know, the first thing that often comes up amongst my colleagues, whether it be Seattle or Spokane or Los Angeles and other ones, is the answer is affordable housing. That's always listed as #1, and that certainly is important. The homeless need a place to stay. But that's not really the root of the problem. I like something Joe Pesci, the actor, said in With Honors, and the actor was asked, you know, how do you solve homelessness? And he said, you see them first as human beings. We don't generally see them as human beings. So really, the important thing that I think the politicians and colleagues can do, immerse themselves a little bit into their lives to understand it. I know if, for example, if a situation came up that politicians had to vote for in Kentucky, for example, and say, you know, we would bust down there, we'd visit the mines, we'd talk to the families, and then we'd come back and we'd vote, having been informed, having walked a little in their shoes. And the same thing is important, I think, is for politicians to have a little courage to do that as well. You know, put on some garden clothes, take a long weekend, take a friend, and go down to a homeless shelter, go down to a camp, and sleep with them incognito, have breakfast with them, talk about their problems, play cards, get into their lives and understand their problems. And then you'll be able to go back and make a vote that will be informed And I think that is so important. It's one of the things that's not being said. We need to have the courage, and we need to get immersed, just like we would in mines, to understand these people. You know, being a politician is a sacred responsibility, and we have to go a little bit farther understanding the people whose votes matter so important to us and that we affect so deeply. So some of the things that just the average person can do regarding the homeless, I think, is read up on the myths. You know, we see that person outside our car window who's in a tent, and a lot of things just pop into our heads that we've been read about in newspapers or the media, and a lot of those things aren't true. You know, the homeless, you know, a big percentage of them have jobs. They're not criminals. You know, I've talked to a number of police chiefs, and they say the crime between a homed person and a home person, there's no meaningful difference. And that's just two examples, there's many. So one of the things a regular person could do is go online and look up the myths. That will help a lot of misunderstandings. You know, we used to have a stigma against people who had tattoos, and today there's still a stigma that people who, for example, who are divorced, you know, they're not trying hard enough, or they don't have enough commitment. And then when you finally get to know those people, you realize that a lot of that is just absolutely not true at all. And the last thing I think people can do is they actually, when they come across a person who are often invisible, people don't even look at them, they just go on by, they can actually say hi. They can strike up a conversation. It's lonely out there, it's hard out there, especially when you're rejected from so many angles. Some of my best friends now are homeless, and they bring so many nice qualities to life, and they have so much wisdom, and they're very generous and caring. You know, I was just last year, and there's a town close by here in Orting. There was a newspaper article about the homeless and the forest behind them. That was kind of disingenuous of an article. So I went to the gas station nearby, and I talked to the ladies who were all in their early 20s, and I said, what are the homeless like for you? And these young girls who had everything to fear because of the proximity of the homeless actually said that they loved them. They said the homeless that are near them are the only ones that will come at night and protect them from the drunk drivers and the people that drive through in their cars. They go into the bathroom, they do drugs, and the homeless ones will come in there and they'll chase them out, and they'll stand guard, and they feel much more safe because the homeless are around. That kind of story is not told in the newspaper. So one of the big concerns that the homeless are often attacked with is that they're addicts, or if we give them money, that they're just going to spend it on alcohol. And it was ironic to me that during these past few months of the pandemic, how all the alcohol sales exploded, how meetings for Alcoholics Anonymous went through the roof, how calls to the suicide hotline and for a therapist were record numbers. And it just kind of showed to me that even the home people, when there's trauma in their lives, turn to some of these unhealthy avenues to make it through. So we really, you know, in our hearts, kind of have to look at the homeless, you know, that often self-medicate through the alcohol, with a little bit less judgment and a little more understanding. As someone once said, you know, if you're warm, it's kind of hard to understand somebody who's cold. And another thing is that it's kind of hard to do cold sober. So just a little things to think about along the way as we look at the homeless, and try to remember the days during the pandemic and how it's even a little trauma affected your own lives. And then imagine them on the streets in the cold, with nowhere to sleep, with no place to put their garbage, with all the rejection. Imagine some of the stuff that they have to go through too, and the trauma they endure. A lot of people write about the homeless, but they don't really understand them through the homeless's eyes. So I would invite anyone to talk to them, to bring them a cup of coffee, sit down, ask them their story. Like any of us, you know, they would enjoy the companionship, and they go through so much rejection in life. Nobody wants them around them because there's always fear that they're this and they're bad that, and really they're just like any one of us. I mean, how many of us, if homelessness were suddenly to happen to you, would you automatically become a criminal and things like that? I mean, it's just a myth. There's more myths about the homelessness than there are nails on a wall. So kind of read beyond those stories and those TV broadcasts. And when you do, I think that you'll make a few friends along the way, and it'll expand your mind. And you know, today it happened to me, you know, tomorrow it can happen to you. And for the politicians too, I'd say, you know, have a little courage, truly. Don't just take what they say from the podium and the news articles. Get into their lives, and then you'll have the right way to make some of these very important decisions.